Welcome back to Coffee and Conversation. So, for all you Audie fans, I had started this video a few minutes ago, and I mentioned that Audie was sunning himself in the front window, and as I said that, he could hear me, because he hears me talking, and that tends to let him know I'm making a video, or I'm talking to him. Doesn't matter. The two of us are the only people / living beings in the house. And consequently, if I talk, that attracts his attention. I'm not sure if he really understands it's the video. He might think I'm talking to him. But regardless, so he hops off the table. He's over here sitting at my feet, and that ended up distracting me, so I had to start again. Yes, Audie is right here. He will probably make an appearance. Yellow. And this is from the little yellow ribbon that Colleen sent me. And that is for Catherine. It is for Lex's mom. It is for everyone coping with cancer. We are sending our very, very best wishes out to you. Yep, here we are. Okay, we got some Audie time. Anyway, we are sending our very, very best wishes out to all of you. And we're hoping that you have plenty of cat snuggle, because nothing beats like a purring cat. I can't think of anything that is more comforting. So Audie, let me pick you up so they can see you. There you go. Oh yeah. I can't hear his purr, but I can feel it in his throat. All right, we are going to quickly break for the intro, and then we will get right back. So Audie is now safely outdoors, sunning himself on the porch railing, which is where he likes to be, because now he's in the sunshine instead of in the window looking out at the sunshine. He should be happy. All right, let's take a quick look at where we were last weekend. And I was talking about cleaning out cabinets, organizing, downsizing. And that's something that I am always mindful of when I do it, because I know how easy it is for downsizing and organizing and just minimalizing, for lack of a better term. I know how easily the means turns into the end. That it's so easy to forget there's a reason why we're doing this, and then let the process take on a life of its own. So, am I doing this just for the sake of organizing, for the sake of minimalizing? No. I need to be mindful that I am doing this to create more space. And yes, I'm probably not going to be using that space for a while, but still, that is my ultimate goal, that I have reasons for doing this. Because one of the biggest problems when you start adopting minimalism as a lifestyle is you're adopting minimalism as a lifestyle. You're no longer in touch with why it appealed to you in the first place, and it starts to become a force of its own. So, the impulse to declutter and downsize that resulted from not being able to find things, or from looking around saying, I don't know what all this chaos is, I can't live like this anymore. That's flushed out. And then the act of organizing, decluttering, that becomes your goal, not making a more livable space for yourself, not being organized so you can find things. No, it all becomes about minimalism. And that's when it starts to take over. Also, that is when it starts to hit the failure point, because people who think they might like to live a minimalist lifestyle are few and far between. So when you start, the impulse looks good. You see somebody's spotless house and you say, I would like to live like that. Yeah, you get into it just so far and then you start saying, no, I don't. I really do like my stuff. I need my creature comforts. And that's when it starts to fall apart. Because, again, it's the process becomes the goal and not the goal becoming the goal. So I wanted to take a quick look at why I think most of us would benefit from a bit of organizing and decluttering. And I thought we would take a look at something we haven't looked at in a while, which is the average amount of living space. Now, I'm going to look at a few countries here. By the way, these are all English-speaking countries because that does cover the overwhelming majority of our community. It doesn't mean I am intentionally slighting everyone else. It just means that, we've got a time limit on this video. I can't go through every country in the world. So I'm sticking with a half a dozen countries that does cover the broadest range of our community. So let's start with Australia. And same as when we looked at this last time, Australia is in the #1 position with an average amount of living space set at 2,303 square feet. And that is 214 square meters. Next up, their near neighbor, New Zealand, 2,174 square feet, or 202 square meters. Now we come over to the other side of the world, and it is the US, with 2,164 square feet, or 201 square meters. We are just a hair behind New Zealand. Next up is Canada. And with Canada, it is 1,475 square feet, or 181 square meters. And next on our list, I was about to say followed by, but no, it is not followed by. We are going much further down the list to pick up Ireland at 957 square feet, or 89 square meters. And a bit behind them is the United Kingdom, 818 square feet, or 76 square meters. And this is, in some instances, a bit of a drop from where it was before. In particular, the UK has gone down quite a bit. But as you can see, some of us are very privileged to have a lot of space. Australia and New Zealand have a great deal of space, mostly because these are countries that have a much lower population density, more land, fewer people. And that makes it possible to create larger homes, lots of space. Also, by the way, just as an aside, I read somewhere a number of years ago that Australians are inclined to spend more time outdoors than other English-speaking people. They go outside. They enjoy their outdoor spaces. They go out and throw some shrimp on the barbie. That is an Australian thing, that sort of not feeling confined to one's home. I suppose a good deal of that comes from having a pleasant climate. But regardless, they do have a great deal of space. We in the US have a great deal of space. Canada has a great deal of space. But when we go over to Europe, where there is a greater population density, you start seeing the numbers drop considerably. Now, I will say that it is my personal belief that in the next time we check these numbers, let me just put it that way, that we are going to see a drop in the housing space available in both Canada and Ireland, because they are both currently experiencing a housing crisis. And that is largely the result of immigration policies that have resulted in an influx of people that simply cannot be housed at the moment by these countries. So hopefully they will both respond up properly to these issues, and the housing will, in fact, I know it's going to go down in the short term, but get back up to where it once was in the long term. I hope they do not experience the same problems experienced in the UK, which is a different kind of housing crisis, particularly in London, where homes are bought by investors rather than people wishing to live in them, which it simply does nothing to alleviate any housing shortages. It's just more speculative than anything else. An investor will buy a property, particularly in London, and some areas are just really ripe for the plucking, knowing that their investment, which is all it is to them, their investment will appreciate in value very quickly over time. So, who knows? I would love to see a world in which the housing supply was dictated by the housing need and not necessarily by corporate investment. But then again, I've always been a bit of a communist in my soul. So I thought we would just take a look at that because, frankly, we in the Anglophone world are very privileged to have this kind of space. A lot of us really do take it for granted. But if we look at things like 484 square feet, that is the average size of a housing unit in Hong Kong. So when you consider that we have so much more space than them, but the folks in Hong Kong are managing to live their lives with less space, we need to keep our sense of perspective. Yes, we have a lot of space. Do we need it? No, we do not. And for a lot of us, living in smaller quarters might be a very good option. So as a consequence, I would say the first step to wrapping your head around living in smaller quarters is probably going to be reducing what you have in your current larger quarters. So there you go. We do need to keep in mind that there is a method to the madness when we start to downsize. For some of us, moving into smaller quarters is going to be a very good move financially. For others, it's going to be a very good move for the practical consideration that we might be getting older. The nest may have emptied. It may be more practical for us to consider moving into smaller spaces that require less care. I have a yard. Now, given the fact that I was a lifelong city resident, the fact that I have an entire third of an acre, which is not much of a yard for this rural area in which I live, it certainly beats the daylights out of the postage-sized lots I grew up in the city. And I look at this and think, it costs me money to have my yard maintained. I get somebody in to do the grass cutting and so on, and I have had to do that because of my difficulty with my knee lately. But as an aside, that's going to be a thing of the past very soon. But still, I need to be mindful that at my age, I might not really want to commit that much time and energy into maintenance of a yard. I might want to reprioritize. And a lot of us might. A lot of us might have to, quite frankly, especially if we are living in areas that are experiencing a housing crisis. We may find that if we don't own our own property, the rents may go up and force us into smaller living spaces. If we do own our own properties, the property values may go up, making the selling of one property and the acquisition of a smaller property more attractive to us. So even though I think most of us buy a home thinking, I'm going to be here the rest of my life, it's not necessarily so. So I guess that's the philosophy behind downsizing, organizing, and creating more space in our environments. The practical considerations. I think there are emotional considerations behind this too. For me, I am not comfortable in a chaotic space. I am also not comfortable in a naked, empty space. Look around. I've got stuff everywhere. I like my stuff. And am I willing to walk away from my stuff in the name of minimalism? No, I am not. So for me, the happy medium is literally the happy medium, the middle spot between chaos and clutter and strict minimalism. That's where I feel good. That's where I feel comfortable. And quite frankly, if I am going to lean a little more on one side than the other, it's probably going to be leaning a little more on the side of stuff, because I do like my stuff. For others, it's going to be leaning a little more on the side of minimalism. I would say, quite frankly, if you have a large family, if you have a lot of children, even if you don't have a lot of children, if your family is large because you have a spouse or a significant other and perhaps a parent or two or four or whatever, there are a lot of ways, even without children, that your personal space can be occupied by a lot of other people. Then yeah, moving over to the minimalist side of the fence might be more attractive to you because of the number of people that are occupying the space, having a greater need for that negative space, for the breathing room, for the walking around room. And that, oh gosh, the walking around move. Walking around move brings me to yet another issue, that because of physical impairment, some of us might need considerably less stuff if we are getting around in a wheelchair, on a walker, with canes or crutches, things like that. Then minimizing the clutter starts to become really important. That becomes a safety issue. Pardon the brief interruption. Audie did, in fact, want to come back in, but he didn't want to come in on his own. He wanted me to go out, pick him up, and bring him back into the house. And yeah, my cat is spoiled, and it's all my fault. I got nowhere to go on this one. I am the one responsible for spoiling him. So he is inside now. So anyway, I guess all of the foregoing was leading to the point that we each choose our own environments based on our own needs. And for some of us, organization is really critical. For others, we can afford to be a little more loosey-goosey with it. Now, when I say I love my stuff and I lean toward the maximalist rather than the minimalist, yeah, it's because I love my stuff. But I must have order because I can't see the broad side of a barn. Consequently, I need to know where everything is because I can't see where everything is. And that's my consideration. And that becomes a greater consideration for most of us as we get older. You get older, your vision starts to fail. That's all there is to it. And that does become a greater consideration for many of us. And as I say, mobility impairments, yeah, that is going to restrict your options in terms of how you can live your life. Can you live your life in something that looks like an antique shop or a pawn shop? Probably not. I would like to live my life like that. To be perfectly candid, if I could live my life in an antique shop, I would be blissfully happy. But the truth is, I can't. So I have to work on this. We all have our own reasons, our own goals. Do you want to downsize so you have less housework, for example? Do you want to downsize because your cousin walked into your kitchen and said, look at this messy counter, and that sort of just struck you the wrong way? We've all got our goals. We all have our reasons for wanting to do this. Or, in fact, for some of us, here we go, here's my boy. For some of us, we don't want to do this at all. For some of us, the idea of cleaning and decluttering and downsizing is just, it's a torment. This is something that we would rather not do. But we all know we have to some extent. We must, because if we don't, eventually we will turn into hoarders. And so some organization, some spring cleaning, for lack of a better term, is in order for all of us. And what I'm saying is we've got to keep that goal in mind. Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to downsize and organize? And this is the part that I hate to admit because it is irrational, absolutely irrational. My driving need to declutter and organize comes from the fact that my mother, and I have mentioned this before, was mere inches away from being one of those people on those hoarder house programs. The reason, and this is why my mother was only inches away and not over the line, she would let us go in and clean things out. She wouldn't complain. She wouldn't say, you're throwing all my valuable junk away. She would let us go in and deal with it. If she had just offered the slightest bit of resistance, I would have to say that would put her over the line into one of those, hoarder house people. And that's always in the back of my head. My fear that if I'm not careful, I'm going to be living the way my mother did. So I have to look at that and deal with the fact that even though it is a completely irrational, 100% emotional motivation, the goal is non-existent because I'm not dealing in the real world. I am dealing in the dark little space in the back of my head that is motivated by fear and panic. So, yeah, my goal is to not turn into my mother. Okay, great. But I still have to be mindful of the benefits I'm getting from it. And that's what I have to talk myself into. I have to tell myself that, yeah, I know I'm doing this so I don't turn into my mother, but I derive benefit from this. Wouldn't it be lovely to have a little more space? And so for me, it's a bit of a strained process. For most of us, it's going to come a little easier. Most of us want to declutter and downsize for very different and much more practical and reasonable reasons than my bizarre fantasy that I'm going to turn into my mother. And that makes it a little easier, I would hope. Of course, without having practical reasons myself, I really don't know. I'm speculating that because it's your reason, it's probably a little easier to cope with than my reason. Meanwhile, I imagine many of you are thinking, oh no, a crazy fear of turning into your mother is a wonderful motivator. Yeah. And again, we are all different. We all respond to different stimuli. For me, oh yeah, fear and panic, those are good ones. For somebody else, it might simply be the perfectly rational desire to be doing less housework, to have an easier time of finding things, to stop spending quite so much money on frivolous household items that you really don't want or need. There are so many different motives out there. And if we catch on to whatever the motive that works for us is, the rationale, the prize, so we can keep our eye on the prize, whatever that prize is. Is that prize having a spotless kitchen that all your friends envy? I don't care if somebody thinks that's superficial and shallow. I think it's a great motivator. I think anything that gets you going, gets you motivated, and helps you get to the point that you want to be at is fantastic. So I am the last person in the world to trivialize somebody else's motives. Remember, mine is fear and panic. Come on. Who would I be to be questioning other people's motives? But I think we should stay in touch with that. I think those of us who are living in areas where we have a lot more space than perhaps we want or need, I absolutely have more space than I need. Could I pack up my cat and I'm thinking whatever else I think I need, which is a lot because, like I say, I love my stuff. Could I pack up my precious stuff and my cat and move into a small apartment somewhere and live my life without any real distress? Of course I could. Absolutely. Of course I could. Am I doing it? No. Is it a goal of mine? No, not at this time. Is it possible that it will be a goal of mine at some point in the future? Yes, absolutely. As we get older, our ability to cope with a very large environment is going to naturally decrease. In many ways, our world tends to constrict a little, and it comes with age, with infirmity, with a lack of the same energy we had when we were young, and we could grab that lawnmower, mow that yard, mow the neighbor's yard, and then take a nice walk in the afternoon. Yeah, that's just a fact of life. But am I willing to forego all of the benefits of organization, of a cleaner, neater space in favor of just, all my stuff? I guess that's the bottom line. Well, the answer to that is no. So I really must work on this because you have to work on it. Entropy is not your friend. Just keep telling yourself that. If I do not actively work on downsizing, organizing, getting rid of things, packing up donation boxes, if I don't actively work on this, The only thing that's going to happen is more stuff is going to fill the spaces. That's all. Because stuff increases. It doesn't automatically decrease. The automatic decrease in your stuff is only through the result of your work and your determination to do this. Because even if we don't actively acquire more stuff will come to us. We go out to the grocery store, we bring back bags of groceries, and we have all of that packaging. Oh, goodness. I'm not a fan of excess packaging, but it makes its way into our homes. You buy something online. If you buy something this big from Amazon, it comes in a box this big, and it is stuffed full of all kinds of packing materials. So yes, then you have the box and the packing materials, and what I like to do is take the box and fill it with stuff and then move that out to a donation site or the recycle bin or even the trash if that's what needs to happen to the stuff. So yeah, if we don't actively police our environment, the stuff just grows all by itself. And that's another thing we truly must keep in mind, that even keeping your environment at its present level of cleanliness for some, chaos for others, even keeping it from growing requires work. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is there is a philosophy behind downsizing. You need to be looking at your goals. If you lose sight of your goals and downsizing becomes the goal, you're very likely to be making a serious mistake, because as many people who have experimented with minimalism will tell you, when the means, getting rid of things, starts to become the end, which is having a less chaotic environment, you're doomed to failure. And that is part of the reason that many people experiment with minimalism and then go back to their old hoarder ways, simply because they find it unsustainable, and it's because they've lost sight of the goal. As long as you keep the goal in mind, you will be able to retain your motivation. If you tell yourself, I am creating more space, assuming that's what you want, it will help motivate you to downsize and declutter. If your goal is to create a lovely wide pathway throughout your entire home to accommodate a wheelchair, to accommodate a cane, a walker, whatever you might need, yeah, you're going to do it. So I just wanted to throw that out, because I do feel that when we don't have our motivation, we doom ourselves to failure. We lose our interest because we don't feel the need anymore. We've lost sight of the goal. Our eyes are no longer on the prize. So, if you're looking at decluttering, downsizing, streamlining, organizing, look at your goals. Remind yourself all the time of what you want your environment to be like at the end of the project. And remember, organizing, downsizing, streamlining, these are projects. They should not take over your whole life. All right, we did get a chance to spend some time with Audie today, and I'm glad for that. We are going to take a look at a slideshow on the way out, and I will probably try very hard to be a little less philosophical when we get together tomorrow, and a little more concrete. But I do think every now and then we need to touch base so that we retain a connection with our goals, with our motives, with where we want to be. All right, that is what I have for you today. We're going to take a look at a slideshow on the way out. I hope to see you all tomorrow. And in the meantime, have a terrific day.